Back live tonight on In Focus. Families of 21 teenagers who died in the Enyobeni Tavern tragedy in June are planning a march demanding an inquest into the actual cause of their children's death. They have since consulted lawyers and NGOs to demand answers from government officials. This after the 1st of September presentation of an inconclusive toxicology report by the Eastern Cape Authorities. Tavern owner Siyakhangela Ndevu and his wife, Vuyokazi, will appear in court on November 25th on charges of selling liquor to minors. Joining us now to make sense of the litigation process is Maurice, the director at Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance. Maurice, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Since that rather strange presentation of the toxicology report, has there been more work in investigations carried out as far as to determine what actually happened to the 21 Enyobeni Tavern children who died?
Well, you know, Tabo, it's very difficult to know what has been done or hasn't been done because it seems like government has been very cagey about sharing information, particularly with the families. So all we know up until recently is that sometime in August or September, the Department of Health in the Eastern Cape met with each of the families individually and orally shared information with them about what they said were the findings of the toxicology report. But they didn't give them any written confirmation of that. And that's the challenge that the families have at the moment, is that they would like to have some kind of real sense of what happened. And they would also like to see a process undertaken that would attempt to get to the bottom of the whole Enyobeni incident. But you know, at the moment, all that's happening is there's a pending court case against the owners of the tavern, which is only really focusing on the infringements of the Liquor Act, i.e. selling alcohol to underage kids and possibly for staying open beyond their normal operating hours. But there's nothing further than that. And there's no, you know, this idea of an inquest, which is really something that should be happening, a formal inquest into what happened. There's no indication of when that might happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, the quickest example that comes to mind of what an inquest would look like is something similar, for example, to Life Enyobeni, which was carried out quite recently, into finding out exactly what happened into moving of those patients. Is that something similar that the family is asking for?
Well, there are two things that happened with Life Enyobeni, actually. The one was there was an inquiry, and that was led by a retired judge, and that was attempting to get to the bottom of the Life Enyobeni situation and to give some guidance as to what should happen after that.
Yes. Currently,
there is an inquest happening.
Yes.
A formal inquest is taking place. It's been going on for almost the whole year. So we would like to see both happening. The one is, you know, to have a formal inquest, which is the prerogative of the NPA, really, for them to determine what happened and why it happened and who could be held accountable for the deaths of these young people. The second thing which we are calling for as SAFA SA is a full-scale inquiry, perhaps similar to the Life Enyobeni one and the Marikana one that happened, a full-scale investigation into the background and the failure, the systemic failure of government in particular at local, municipal, provincial and national level in terms of what they did or didn't do that led to the Enyobeni incident happening. And, you know, from a national level, it's that we've been sitting waiting for the Liquor Amendment Bill, which was first mooted back in 2016, to be passed, to be enacted. As an act, it hasn't happened. We have to look at the province, where you've got a liquor board, you've got a Department of Economic Development under whom the liquor board falls, and the liquor board is supposed to ensure that the awarding of licenses is done in such a way that it doesn't cause social harm. And then you have a municipality that's supposed to ensure that whoever is running any kind of business, whether a liquor outlet or not, is complying with certain regulations. And we feel that none of them actually have done their work properly. And the reason why we want this kind of inquiry is because if we don't have such an inquiry, if we don't really unpack what has happened, we're going to have more Enyobenis in the future.
Yeah. So you're saying the arrest of the tavern owner, really on the liquor license issue, would be a tip of the iceberg. One, lawmakers
Absolutely.
would need to talk about why they have not amended the laws. Two, you want the regulator also to be wrapped around the knuckles as to why didn't they regulate, and the municipalities in enforcing bylaws.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, in the case of the tavern owners, they are simply being charged for selling to underage people, and as I said, possibly for operating outside of the operating hours. But 21 young people died in their premises. Somebody has to be held accountable for that. You can't, it's a slap on the wrist really to just target the tavern owner simply for Liquor Act violations. And the family have made it very clear that they want to see greater charges leveled against the adults who were running the tavern, who owned the tavern and who were running the tavern. But as far as government is concerned, government is supposed to protect people. It's supposed to have laws in place. It's supposed to have a duty of care towards society. And everybody knows that alcohol can be a problematic substance. And when I say everybody, I'm talking about globally. It's not just a South African issue. It's a global issue. And in every single country in the world, you have some kind of regulation around alcohol. And in South Africa, we adopted a new policy in 2016, a very good policy actually, which takes account of the weaknesses of the 2003 Liquor Act, and also gives voice to the World Health Organization global strategy to reduce alcohol-related harm of 2010. But that law has never been passed, despite what we've learned under COVID, actually, because COVID, I think, demonstrated to the country in a way has never been seen before, that we do have a challenge in the country and that something needs to be done to reduce the risks associated with alcohol, not to stop people drinking, not to close all liquor outlets down, but to ensure that it's understood that alcohol is a problematic product. It's a dangerous product, needs to be handled correctly. And we need to, and if you look at what happened with Enyobeni, here you had a bunch of young kids who were celebrating pens down, and they chose somebody as young as 13 to go to a tavern to do that. Now, how does that happen? And there are three critical issues one needs to look at there. The one is advertising, because advertising normalizes alcohol and creates this idea that the best way to celebrate anything is with a bottle of alcohol in your hand. Yeah. The second thing is very poor adult modeling. So we have people in communities, parents and other community members who are very poor models for young people in terms of how to manage alcohol. And the third thing is peer pressure. So all of these things, plus the overabundance of alcohol outlets, people not obeying the law, the number of unlicensed outlets, all of these contribute to a climate where young people are conditioned into believing that alcohol has to be part of their lives. And that's something that has to change. We also need to look at the fact that we don't have enough facilities in our communities, particularly our poorer communities, for young people to engage in other kinds of activities, sporting activities, recreational activities, cultural activities. We still have the same kind of inequity, the imbalances of accessibility to resources that existed under apartheid. Government has to actually step forward and do what they need to do. And what we call as a whole of government approach. It's not the responsibility of one department. That's why we as SAPA are calling on the president to call for an inquiry, because the president, as the leader of the country and the leader of government, needs to actually talk to cabinet and say, as cabinet, we have to take holistic responsibility for dealing with this issue. It's not, they cannot say it's the responsibility of the Department of Trade and Industry or the Department of Social Development. It's got to be dealt with by cabinet as a whole, led by the president.
So that is a holistic, far-reaching intervention, the inquiry. But I suppose the immediate thing for the family is the inquest to really determine what is the cause of death. Because I believe that is the biggest answer that they are seeking right now. Do you think they would be able to do that with the kind of work that has been done already by government? The bodies have been buried. Would they be able to get to that kind of detail?
Look, I mean, tests were done on the bodies before they were buried, and we do have the impression from the NPA that they are considering extending the charges against the tavern owners. So we'll see. I mean, the court is reconvening on the 25th of November, so we'll see what the NPA has to say. But you're quite right. The family would like, first of all, access to written confirmation of what the toxicology studies. First of all, the toxicology studies took far too long. In the 21st century, you really shouldn't take so long to actually come up with results for trying to determine what might have caused the deaths. But secondly, the families are not being given written reports on the basis, apparently, according to the Department of Health, that there's going to be an inquest. So they're almost adopting a kind of sub judice rule that says we can't release the information in writing until the inquest. But the families are saying, no, we need that information now because we need it for closure, but we also need it to understand what happened and, I guess, for them to prepare themselves for possibly some form of litigation that they might decide to embark on together with their lawyers, because clearly they are dissatisfied with what is happening and they may decide to take action themselves. I don't think that's immediate. I think they are hoping that the 25th of November will indicate a seriousness by the NPA and by government to try and find some kind of accountability. And they're hoping that the inquest will be announced soon and that there will be some indication that they can. I mean, I think the key thing is that if there is a form of inquest, the family themselves will be able to participate fully in the process. They'll be able to raise the concerns that they have. They'll be able to bring evidence to bear that they have. They'll be able to have legal representation and have a voice. And that's the most important thing I think that they would like to have.
Maurice, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. Maurice Smilers, he is with the Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance, a director there.